Welcome back to our journey through the fascinating history of Africa. Before the arrival of Europeans, the continent was a patchwork of powerful kingdoms and empires, each with their own unique culture and traditions. These pre-colonial civilizations fought fiercely for their territories and defended them with incredible military forces and awe-inspiring architecture. But everything changed with the invasion of Western superpowers during the scramble for Africa. In just 45 years, the continent went from having only 10% under European control to a shocking 90%. The Berlin Conference of 1884 saw the Western European diplomats redraw the map of Africa, creating new county boundaries and merging former kingdoms with neighboring rivals. In this series, we'll dive into the fascinating history of pre-colonial kingdoms and empires across Africa and beyond. Starting with one of the most politically advanced civilizations, the Sokoto Caliphate. We'll explore the stories of bravery, power, and diversity that shaped Africa's past. As we delve deeper into Africa's history, we'll also examine the impact of colonialism, nationalism, and tribal differences on this incredible continent. With over 2,000 tribes and languages, Africa boasts a cultural diversity that is unmatched by any other continent in the world. Yet these tribal differences have also been the source of conflict and civil wars across the continent. So, join us on this exciting adventure through time. If you enjoy this type of content, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share it with your networks. Let's discover the wonders of Africa together. The Sokoto Caliphate, also known as the Fulani Empire, was a Muslim political and religious kingdom that flourished in West Africa in the 19th century. The empire was founded by Fulani Islamic scholar Usman Fodio, who was part of the Muslim reformers of the Hausa states who did not perceive their rulers to be faithful adherents of Islam. As a result, Usman Fodio initiated Fulani jihads, holy wars, that would see them conquer several Hausa states and surrounding territories to control what is now northern Nigeria. Usman Fodio was a successful ruler and established a united political and economic empire. At the same time, he propagated a reformist Islamic movement that was intended to address syncretic slack or superficially Islamic practices in the region. The Sokoto Caliphate thrived until the start of the 20th century when the empire fell to French and British colonial forces. In the late 18th century to early 19th century, Usman Fodio was incredibly concerned by the rampant corruption and decadence he witnessed in the Hausa states. He observed that the ruling elites in these nations were more concerned with collecting wealth and power than maintaining Islam's teachings. He started preaching a message that called for a reformation and rebirth of the faith, as well as a return to the original doctrines of the religion. This message struck a chord with a significant number of individuals. As a result, Usman Fodio was able to amass a sizable following of devoted Muslims throughout the course of his career. However, in 1802, the Hausa king Yunfa tried to kill Usman Fodio because he thought he was a threat to his rule. Usman escaped the king's evil scheme and went all over the country preaching Islam, teaching people and writing. During that period, Usman amassed more followers who later swore allegiance to him as commander of the faithful. In 1804, while Usman was in exile, he launched a holy war against the various corrupt rulers of the Hausa states. Usman Fodio gathered a large army consisting of Fulani people and his followers and led them to conquer various states in the region, including Gobe, Sokoto, and Kano, amongst other major states. His armies were victorious in overthrowing the prevailing powers and establishing a new state that adhered to the tenets of Islam. This new empire became known as the Sokoto Caliphate and quickly grew to become the most powerful empire in the region. Usman dan Fodio went on to become the first Sultan of Sokoto. Over the next several years, the new Sokoto Caliphate continued to spread its influence, and by 1808, it had gained control of several states in northern Nigeria. After gaining power over the various Hausa states, Usman focused on expanding the Sokoto Empire. Under his reign and that of his successors, the Sokoto Caliphate increased its territory, assimilated new territories and people, and constructed a just and equitable society based on Islamic law. His achievements made Sokoto stand out in terms of political structure, economic success, wealth, culture, and having wise leaders. With time, Usman's power started to attract interest from neighboring regions, and scholars and merchants started visiting Sokoto. The Sokoto Caliphate grew through a combination of military victories, religious conversions, and diplomatic talks. At the start of the empire, Usman dan Fodio led several successful military campaigns against surrounding states, capturing major cities and setting up new administrative centers. After capturing new territories, they were subdivided into smaller states. Each of these states were headed by a governor who was accountable for preserving order and upholding the rules of the caliphate. Besides their strategy of military expansion, the Sokoto Caliphate also prioritized educational opportunities and religious conversions. In order to disseminate the teachings of Islam to previously unreached regions, missionaries were dispatched and schools were set up to teach the fundamental principles of the religion. As a result, many individuals in the region converted to Islam and became subjects of the Caliphate. In addition to military might and religious conversions, the Caliphate was also skilled in diplomacy. It did this by establishing diplomatic relations with the governments surrounding it and by sending delegates to the major European powers to gain recognition and assistance. These measures helped secure the Caliphate's frontiers and keep peace with its neighbors, allowing it to concentrate on developing its internal infrastructure and increasing the control of its lands. The Sokoto Caliphate's political structure was based on Islamic traditions and law. It involved a religious and political system that combined the leadership of religious leader, a caliph, with the administration of the state. The Caliphate's administration consisted of the central government and the provinces. The caliph, also a spiritual leader, was the head of the central government. He was assisted by a council of advisors who were tasked with managing the administration of the Caliphate's affairs. The provinces were led by a governor whom the caliph appointed. The governors were in charge of the overall administration of the provinces. Also, the governors had a council of advisors who advised them on numerous matters such as taxation, justice, and security. Additionally, the Caliphate possessed a sophisticated legal system, complete with a court of justice that presided over trials and ensured compliance with the law. The court system utilized the Islamic legal system, and all judges were educated in Islamic legal principles. Furthermore, the Caliphate was a highly centralized state with a powerful central authority that regulated on all elements of society, including religion, economy, and politics. This was one of the distinguishing characteristics of the Caliphate. The economic structure of the Sokoto Caliphate was remarkable in its level of effectiveness. The Sokoto Caliphate was founded on an agricultural economy. Most of its inhabitants were farmers who planted and produced a variety of crops such as millets, beans, and groundnuts. These crops were traded both within the empire and with the territories that bordered it, which resulted in a significant increase in the Caliphate's revenue. In addition, the Sokoto Caliphate possessed a taxing system that was both well organized and efficient, which assisted in maintaining the government's financial stability. It was mandatory for taxpayers to pay taxes on their crops, livestock, and commercial activities. These taxes would then be used to support the administration, maintain the army, and fund public projects. The Sokoto Caliphate was a brilliant example of religious and cultural unification in West Africa. The region is still influenced to this day by the cultural legacy of the Sokoto Caliphate. The Sokoto Caliphate's religious traditions were one of the empire's most defining characteristics. Islam was the predominant religion in the area, and practicing Islam was a significant component of daily life for the people who lived in the Caliphate. The mosques served as a hub for both religious and social activity and were also vital in passing on Islamic knowledge and principles to the subsequent generations. The intellectuals and religious authorities of the Sokoto Caliphate had a high level of respect and played an essential part in the life of the society. They were tasked with disseminating the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, including Islamic law instruction, religious leadership, direction, and religious counsel. The Sokoto Caliphate was also known for its extensive oral tradition, which contributed significantly to the region's cultural history. The telling of stories and legends was an essential aspect of daily life in the Caliphate, and it served as a means of preserving the people's history, values, and beliefs. These tales were told from one generation to the next, preserving the cultural history of the Caliphate and preventing its loss. In addition, the people who lived in the Sokoto Caliphate had a long and illustrious history of music, dance, and poetry, which they utilized to communicate their feelings, recount stories, and commemorate significant events. Another critical component of the Sokoto Caliphate culture was its great sense of community. The inhabitants of the Caliphate had a strong sense of unity, which was bolstered by their shared religions and cultural convictions. These beliefs brought the people of the Caliphate together. This was reflected in their social and political institutions, as well as how they went about their daily lives. Everyone had a duty to perform and a responsibility to their community. They supported one another, pooled their resources, and collaborated in their efforts in order to create a brighter future for themselves and their children. Additionally, the Sokoto Caliphate was particularly famous for its diverse cultures. Although Muslims made up the vast majority of the population, there were still people of other ethnicities and religious persuasions residing in the area. The Caliphate was a civilization that encouraged the sharing and tolerance of many cultures. It was open to individuals from all walks of life and welcomed them with open arms. This diversity was reflected in the Sokoto Caliphate's art, architecture, and literature, all of which were influenced by a wide variety of cultural traditions. The architectural expertise of the Sokoto Caliphate was well known, and the empire was famed for constructing many remarkable buildings, including palaces, mosques, schools, and fortifications. The architecture of the city of Sokoto, which served as the capital of the Caliphate, reflected the city's busy lifestyle and prosperous economy. The palace of the Caliph was a magnificent structure that was ornamented with elaborate carvings and arcs, and it also contained a number of spacious courtyards and gardens. One of the most well-known buildings in Sokoto was the Sultan's Mosque, a magnificent building with soaring minarets and ornate carvings all over its exterior. The mosque served as the city's spiritual hub, and it was there that the Caliph would gather his supporters to lead them in prayer and deliver sermons to them. In addition to being a site of worship, the mosque served as a center of disseminating religious knowledge, drawing students from all over the Caliphate. Fortresses were yet another significant example of the Caliphate's distinctive architectural style. Because the Caliphate was continuously under threat from the states close to it, the Caliph gave orders for the construction of various fortresses to secure the city. These enormous fortifications had high walls and towers, and they were carefully placed all over the city's outskirts to protect it from potential attackers. The fortifications not only acted as a deterrent for future invaders, but also provided a safe refuge for the residents of the Caliphate whenever there was an imminent threat. The military of the Sokoto Caliphate was a formidable force that assisted the Caliphate in expanding its territory and keeping control over the people who lived under its rule. It was made up of both regular troops, who were referred to as the Yanfada, and more loosely organized by a group of volunteers who were termed the Jihadiya. The Yanfada were highly geared for battle, both in terms of equipment and training, with a particular emphasis on cavalry and infantry strategies. They were armed with muskets and swords and had a reputation for being highly disciplined and thriving on the battlefield. On the other hand, the Jihadiya were less formally organized, and they were frequently sent for raids and other ad hoc military actions. Among the key strengths of the Caliphate's military was its ability to quickly organize vast numbers of warriors. They achieved this by utilizing a well-developed communication system in addition to a well-organized chain of command. Additionally, the Caliphate used an advanced intelligence network, which assisted in staying one step ahead of any dangers and allowing it to react swiftly to any challenges to its rule. Despite its remarkable accomplishments, the Sokoto Caliphate was doomed to decline and fall in the long run. The reasons for this decline were numerous and varied, but some of the significant factors included the internal division, resistance from neighboring states, and the arrival of the colonial powers. Following Usman dan Fodio's death, the Caliphate was ruled by a succession of his heirs, who were effectively referred to as the Sultans. These rulers successfully preserved the state's integrity for a period of time. Nevertheless, as time went on, they were forced to contend with the intensifying competition that existed amongst the various Caliphate groups. This internal conflict was made worse by the absence of a well-defined strategy for the transition of power, as sultans frequently had several heirs, all of whom vied for the same position in the government. The divisions weakened their political structure, and the empire soon started to divide. The opposition from the neighboring states to the Caliphate of Sokoto was yet another significant contributor to its collapse. Even though it possessed formidable military capabilities, the Caliphate was not immune to attacks from other states, since they considered it a threat to their power. This resulted in a string of conflicts and raids, which drained the Caliphate's resources and reduced its armed forces' power. The most prominent of these was the Fulani War, which saw the Caliphate come under attack from surrounding powers that wanted to destroy its dominance. These states were involved in the conflict. The establishment of colonial powers was another significant factor that contributed to the fall of the Sokoto Caliphate. The British, who had already established themselves in surrounding colonies, viewed the Caliphate as a potential threat to their interests in West Africa. This threat was posed by the Caliphate's ability to control trade routes. They intended to conquer the Caliphate by leveraging the power that they had over the territory, both military and administrative, to establish control over the region. This was achieved through a succession of wars, the most significant of which was the Anglo-Sokoto War, which took place in 1903. The upshot of this was the disintegration of the Caliphate of Sokoto, with the territory of the Caliphate being divided amongst the British and their allies. Despite its collapse, the impact of Sokoto Caliphate is still felt in Nigeria and other parts of West Africa. The legacy left behind by Usman dan Fodio and his supporters continues to motivate future generations of Africans to work towards radical harmony, equal rights, and justice. The present-day Sokoto Caliphate is evidence of Nigeria's rich cultural and historical heritage. It is a symbol of the region's great Islamic history, a monument to the eminent rulers and scholars of the past. Even in present society, the Caliphate maintains its status as a thriving society that has a long and illustrious history of Islamic study, worship, and charitable work. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the pre-colonial kingdoms and empires of Africa. We hope that you enjoyed learning about the incredible stories and cultures that make up this diverse continent. As we reflect on the impact of colonialism, nationalism, and tribal differences, we encourage you to continue exploring and engaging the history of current events of Africa. By understanding the past, we can better appreciate the present and work towards a brighter future. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. And if you have any suggestions for future topics or feedback on this series, please leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for watching, and we look forward to exploring more of Africa's rich history and culture with you soon.